to our in-person listening session of the California Truth and Healing Council up here in Weaverville. My name is Christina Snider-Ashtari, and I'm a member of the Dry Creek Ranch Group in Pomo Indians, Mihilikana and Makamo, and I am the Tribal Affairs Secretary for Gavin Newsom, the governor. A huge thank you to Miranda for partnering with us today, and also to the Rancheria for helping us with this facility. And again, as always, great and thank you to Governor's Office of Tribal Affairs staff and partners. We'll have a few housekeeping items, but I do want you two to introduce yourselves real quick before we do housekeeping, and then we'll go around, have introductions from all of you, and kind of get into the listening portion of today's meeting.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Loretta Miranda. I'm a descendant of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians in Southern California. My great-grandparents come from the Warner Springs and the Barren Long Ranch area near San Diego County. I currently serve as Deputy Tribal Affairs Secretary. Previously served as the General Counsel for the Group Tribe. So just really thankful again to be up here, and thank you all for your patience while we were getting everything set up. Really appreciate that.
Hello everyone, my name is Jason McCannell. I work at California State Parks in the Director's Office, but I have recently signed an agreement to work with the Office of Tribal Affairs as a researcher with the Council, providing materials, whatever research-based materials, documentation that is needed in this process. So I'll be attending all these, listening, doing my best to listen. It's not my top skill, but I'm learning each time. I also should mention that at State Parks and also in advisory committee appointment on the Department of Interior, I do a lot of work on place names. I'm a geographer. I was in charge of changing all the SQ names within State Parks last year when that effort was made at the federal level. I'm working on a committee that is sort of working on other efforts, other similar efforts that we made in the future to remove derogatory names from the map. And I work with tribes around the state to try to restore native names to features and facilities within state parks. So if you have any issues like that, you should definitely come to me, get into contact. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason. So I'm going to go through our agenda, a little bit of logistics, and then we'll have Council Member Sisk say a few words if you'd like to. And then we'll go around and introduce ourselves.
I forgot to mention one thing. Wearing multiple hats here, I also take photos and post them onto our social media page. And so I tend to take a lot of pictures when people are doing the introductions, and then I calm down a bit, and I'm still learning, so I take a lot of pictures. I hope that one of them comes out good. And so if you do not want me to use your photo, just please let me know, and we will not post it.
Thank you. And just to also say a bit about the work we're having Jason do, in some of these conversations and in some of our consultations, we're hearing that there are certain resources, certain primary documents that might be useful to have as part of this record. Some of those are documents of indenture of Indian people. Some of those are documents what was the other one I was asking you about?
Well, sterilization.
Sterilization was a eugenics office in California, and there's an open call for relatives, descendants, and people who were victims of that process. There were a lot of Native people who were sterilized during that process, and it was typically within institutions. So women who were incarcerated, women who were in Indian Health Service facilities, women who were otherwise unable to determine their own futures, which in some cases I think is all women always, but I'm particularly thinking about patriarchy right now, but it's fine. But if that is something that you'd like to learn more about, some of those records are missing, which is also, I think, something that we need to highlight in this report, is like, to the extent that records have been destroyed or are missing, we should just assume, a large number of people are gonna be bereft of those histories for forever. And we need to figure out how to account for that. But we'll talk a little bit about that in the overview of the council itself. if there are records, particularly records held by the state, or particularly records related to the state's actions to Indian people that you would like to have Jason look into, he's basically we've charged him with contacting every single county to track down all these records. But if there are things that you you've heard that this thing happened, you know that it's within this county, you don't know how to go about looking for it, we can have him pull those records, or at least figure out whether they exist. And I know we've had discussions with some folks up here about certain BIA records that were held within the HOOPA agency. And so if those are things that would be useful to help track down, we can have him look into that as well. And where they might be actually housed right now. We'll probably ask about boarding school documents too at some point, because there's some original letters written to and from boarding school attendees. So if you have family that attended boarding school and you'd like to look more into that, please let us know. Today we are going to have a brief overview of the council and its process. And then we'll get into tribal discussion and community discussion. Please note that input from local tribes, which I think is most of the folks here, it will be prioritized, followed by California Native Americans, then followed by allies in the community. Typically what we'll do is we'll start with introductions, but I do want to do the kind of overview before we do that, so that if something comes up in the introductions and you want to say something, that you can do that at that time. We are, as I noted at the beginning, recording this meeting, and we will be posting it to the Office of Tribal Affairs YouTube channel. Please let us know if there's any point that you'd like to pause in this meeting, or if there's anything that you say that you decide you don't want to be public or on the record, and we can remove that as well. Additional details, including meeting dates, agendas, and background information, are available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. And you can follow the council by going to the California Truth and Healing Council updates blog, or by following the Governor's Office of Tribal Affairs on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We are going to have our virtual meeting this month, convening, gathering. Not a council meeting, but similar to our listening sessions, to go over updates to subcommittees, go through any kind of technical issues that any of you are having, and anything that you will need to be able to move forward. And that will be on Wednesday, August 23rd at 5 p.m. We're also going to be tabling all day tomorrow at Salmon Fest at Yurok. So if anybody is out there, please feel free to come by and say hi. I'd now like to remind everyone that in joining us here today, you agree to adhere to the council's principles for respectful engagement, which we have a copy of on this table, and that is also available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. Refusal to adhere to the principles, which apply to all participants, including governing council members, staff, and community members, whether present or not, may result in your removal from today's convening. Just a note that if you are a member of the subcommittees, we'll go over this in the virtual meeting as well, but those principles apply to those as well. So to the extent that those bodies are being used to basically call out community members, call out specific tribes, we're not tolerating that behavior, and really encourage you to be working toward the work of this council in those spaces. In order to create a space where participants feel welcome, respected, and able to speak comfortably, we'll uphold the following principles in all convenings of the council. We ask that you all work toward their stewardship with us. If you're a participant, we ask that you engage in the work of the council and with others in an open and respectful way. Engage in behaviors that will make others feel welcome. Take care of your emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical well-being, and seek support as you need it. We do have some supportive resources available if you would like to follow up after this meeting. Typically we will have someone from the local community present. Do you want to jump in?
And today we have some brochures from the Cal Hope Red Line, which is geared towards Native peoples and kind of a hub of different resources. So I would urge you all to utilize that service. And I think it started with COVID, but as OKIDS has a whole breadth of resources. So any sort of substance use or emotional well-being, please reach out. And but yeah, generally we do have a practitioner with us. And unfortunately, we're not able to secure one today, so we at least want to give some resources. We know these conversations are heavy and can be very triggering. So what we don't want to do is re-traumatize throughout this process. We want to be able to be as supportive as we can be.
And I think on that note, if there's any moment in this whole process that you feel you could benefit from something that's not being provided or that doesn't exist or is under-resourced, please let us know, because that can be helpful for us in shaping recommendations and shaping budget recommendations as well, at least on the state side. And then for those members of the press in attendance or viewing online at a later time, we ask that you engage in this process with deference to the Native experience, and that you commit to obtaining consent and final review from the Native peoples that you hear from today. We don't want this to be an extractive process, and we hope that you'll assist us in creating a safe space that is open, transparent, and welcome to all. And I think also in that vein, cultivate an understanding that the lens that non-Native people view this work through is necessarily going to be an outsider lens. And so understanding what the people who are engaging in this process are saying and what they're communicating versus what you're receiving, and whether those are at odds or different or are aligned, I think is part of this, this process as well of Native people reclaiming and owning our own voices. So, I'll do introductions first, we'll do an overview, and then we'll get into further discussion if that's helpful. Does that sound right? Okay. I'm gonna start with Councilmember Sisk, if you want to say any words.
Think of something. I'm glad to see everybody here. Wish we could have had more folks show up, and but I know it's in the middle of the day and it's a weekday and lots of people have lots of things to do, including myself, and my kids are in school. I had to arrange some other stuff for them to get picked up. But I think this is an important get together for the governor to set this up so that we can voice our concerns and to come up with how are we going to heal. I think we need to get to that level. It's like, what are those things? A lot of us, I think, that who have lived the Indian life pretty much know much of the issues of sterilization and of dropouts and education failings and boarding school atrocities, and being landless and being unrecognized. In this part of the state, it seems to be a huge issue. And so I hope that, we'll be able to discuss some of those things and come up with some direction or at least ask the questions that hopefully Christina will take back to the governor, and we go from there. So thank you for all being here and willing to voice your opinions for yourself, your families, and your communities. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Borden. I'm a Yurok tribal member and a descendant of the Winfields. And I was previous council member for the Yurok tribe. I now sit on the board of United Indian Health Services. And I also sit on the board for CRIB, and I'm also on the executive team at CRIB.
And I'm her better half. No. I'm Bob Borden. I'm vice chair of Noromaquintu in Trinity County. Where some of my projects is usually on the coast. They're building a traditional family house over there, and also a traditional sweat house over there at Palowa on the clinic over there.
My name's Cindy, and I'm a Neuro-Mequintu, and I live in Anderson. However, I spend most of my time up in Trinity County working for the tribe. I'm the tribal TANF representative for TANF in Trinity County, and I sit on several boards. I'm a cultural resource monitor, and that's about it.
And I'm Callie Sis.
Where are you from?
And I'm chief of the Winnemucca tribe, and our watershed is the McLeod coming off of Mount Shasta. And we are currently really doing a lot for winter run salmon and trying to get our salmon back from New Zealand, so it kind of absorbs our time right now, but good thing.
Good afternoon, my name is Louise Davis. I'm a Stottley from the Pit River Tribe, and I sit on the Pit River Health Board and also work at the Rancheria.
She does a lot more. My name is Ida Riggins, and I am a member of the Pit River Tribe. And I just, taking a break from politics right now, taking some time off, but I think this is great. When I heard about this meeting, when we talk about how are we going to heal, I think that's the key is, a lot of people talk about, what we could be doing. And my thing is always, I've been involved in different aspects throughout California with Governor Newsom's things that he's been doing, like the housing and the ICWA has been big on my plate. But I think that it's really important for us as community members. We know our people, we know what's going on in our communities, and so that's why we're here, and to remember to use that voice of what comes to our heart, what needs to be said. And sometimes we say things that people don't want to hear, but it has to be said, so we can have that dialogue. And so that's why I'm here today. Thank you.
My name is Marie DiMaggio, and I'm a descendant from someone who came from Ukiah, Rancheria, from Ukiah. And my grandmother was a residential school survivor, and she did everything she could to keep the tradition alive, and that's why I'm coming here, to sit with my people. That way.
Good afternoon. My name's Paul Ammon. I'm the tribal chair of Sonoma here in Trinity County. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work that's been accomplished. But some of the work that's been done in the past on committees and boards and things seems to be ignored and not making the progress it should have been, or even recommended to proceed. But again, we're home. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Greg Lemon from Snugler, and we've been looking for recognition for our people for so many years. Like talk truth and healing down. Like I always feel like we're getting timed out. Like my father, he's native. Like my kids were born there and blue eyes. That you might not be native, but we dance, and we have culturally significant heritage. We participate in, but we're not recognized people. And you talk that timeline in these subcommittees, and you look at reports on your website, all 1997 years, pages and pages of recommendations. And we sit here today, in 2025, we'll do another report and make more recommendations. And for me, I told my people that the clock's running out of the time.
My name is Wanda Wilkes, and I'm a member of the Pit River Tribe from the Mendacy Band. In my lifetime, I've set up a lot of committees. And I keep saying, oh, yeah, it's time for me to rest. But there's always, the fight is always there. And I keep going to the meetings. Time goes on, and I'm still here.
My name is Lorraine Lindsay. I'm Wintu, Pit River, Apache, recognition. You know, I'm enrolled here for a nation under my mother, but my father's people are not recognized, and that hurts my heart. And I'm always going to stand up for them. And you know, the government has us all kinds of divided this way and that, you know, but it's important because we still have that responsibility and obligation as a Lincoln person to stand for our people, to, you know, continue to do what I can for them. My father, my grandfather, my great-grandparents have, you know, passed on, and at one point we were recognized, you know, and then they weren't recognized when they passed, and so I have aunts and uncles and close relatives, sisters, siblings, and my siblings, you know, none of them are recognized, and that's not acceptable to me. So that's why I'm here, and glad to be here. I just want to acknowledge all my relatives in the room.
Hi, my name is Victoria Gimmel. I have been an advocate for Native people's rights issues and just for people in general for over 25 years, if not, well, basically my whole life. I was raised by an activist. And that's partly why I'm here, to honor his legacy and carry on that work, not just for him, but for our ancestors and their sacrifices. And also for our children. It's very critical. I sit on quite a few committees, one being currently the urban committee for this initiative. I'm here to ensure that this isn't a mining session of our people, that there's actual equitable action that comes of this, and that, you know, it takes a lot for our people to express their traumas, and that that's just not gonna be someone checking a box. So that's why I'm here, and then also discuss the plethora of issues that have happened to our people, especially the non-recognized and recognized, because I am too in the same situation as my relative here, where part of my tribal nations are not recognized, and whereas the other part is, and there's even some issues within that, even within the recognized side. So that's just my share. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. I'm gonna now go into a little bit of what the Truth in Healing Council is. And I know we got a late start, so we'll stay as long as you'd like to, but understand that also it is a Friday and people may need to get home to folks. And as long as you like to doesn't mean like 9 p.m., but I think we can stay a little bit over if that is what it takes. And again, I apologize for how much time it took me to get here and our setup, and want to be respectful of all of your time and the effort it took for you to get here. So the Truth in Healing Council itself was created under executive order by the governor back in 2019. When he first came to office, we had a discussion about what he could do that would build on the work that had already been done by the state. And so up to that point in time, Governor Brown had been kind of a long ally of Indian country. You know, he was in office and oversaw the creation of the Native American Heritage Commission. And we're actually pulling up some of the archives from that because that was after a pretty big convening, similar to kind of what's happening now, of California Indians getting together and talking about what were the, you know, ongoing needs for California Indian country. So we're pulling up those documents as well because they're in the state archives, just to see if anything has changed or whether there's still a lot of outstanding issues. What came out of that conference was really that there needed to be something created to protect cultural resources and sacred sites. At the time, there was a lot of development happening throughout the state, and there was an acknowledgement, and I think the thinking has changed over time, and many of you have been doing this for a long enough time that you understand kind of where the pendulum swings. And at the time, there was a lot of thinking that we needed to preserve what was left, and find out a way to create a native voice in spaces where development was just happening pretty rapidly. So Governor Brown, again, was a pretty good ally, created the position of the tribal advisor, created the office of the tribal advisor and the charge to do consultation. And when Governor Newsom came in, he wanted to do something more, he wanted to do something meaningful, and he wanted to do something that would kind of elevate this work on top of all of that. So the one thing he dug in on, the first thing he dug in on was, elevating the consultation role and the consultation positions throughout agencies. So you'll notice that over the past few years, there are several new roles for Native people within state government. That said, there's still some issues there. We don't have the support systems we need to be able to do this sustainably long term. It's really challenging to be on the inside when you are from the community, and it requires a lot more therapy than we have.
And we're not therapists, so we try each other's.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts too. Yeah, so navigating these systems is incredibly challenging as Native people. But we have part of the solution that we've been, sort of aiming towards is creating more of these positions so more Native people can come in and we at least can have a shared experience and have kind of a group of us that are thinking about how to navigate this in the best interest of California Native people. So the second thing that he did was when he learned that he was the 40th governor and no one had ever apologized for the actions of the state at its creation, he wanted to do that. And in order to make that meaningful, we also created this mechanism, the California Truth and Healing Council, under that executive order, in order to really create space for Native voices to drive what needs to be done and what needs to be accounted for versus an apology moving on and kind of saying like that chapter's over, we know what happened, let's just move on with our lives. This process is meant to be a process of accountability on the terms of Native people. And so instead of the state saying, these are the problems as we identify them through the histories that we wrote and that, we preserved, that created these issues, and here's the things that we think that Native people need in order to heal from that. This process is really intended to really understand what was lost as a result of the state's actions, what continues to be lost as a result of the state actions, like understanding that nothing can actually account for that loss. What can the state do? What can private partners do? What can citizens of California do to better acknowledge this awful history, better understand the shared accountability of all Californians and anyone who's benefited from California lands or resources to California Native peoples, and really make an effort toward making that better or right for Native people. That's a huge task. So it does have a lengthy timeline, which has been impacted a lot by COVID. But we do want to make sure that we are doing this thoughtfully. So the initial deadline for the report that would include both the history of that early California from the Native perspective, so not necessarily like a record of massacre. It could be if your tribe wants that to be your story, but also a record of survival, who fought back, who should we be celebrating, and also then what is the legacy of what happened there? Is it that you're now part of a tribe that's actually 3 different tribes and you're not all related and you have different cultural practices and so you fight about it all the time and you can't get anything done? Like, that's a big problem. Is it that, you're relocated from your resources and you'll never be able to access them because they're all private and they're coastal lands and they're so expensive that even if you wanted to buy them, which is offensive, you couldn't afford them? Is it that you've been made invisible by this lack of history and truth-telling and dominant narrative, and so other populations are getting to be first in the line for any sort of reparative and restorative justice? So I think all of those are things we've heard, but really it's, you know, based on your experience as a people's, what happened, what continues to happen, and what do you want the state and citizens to do about it, to know about it, to commit to, in order for that to start feeling like real accountability. So that report is due in 2025. We imagine it will be kind of an initial framing report, similar to what the boarding school report was that came out from Interior, where it's just skimming the surface, but it's outlining what we've heard, what we can take as first steps that we can do now, and where these measures of accountability need to be checking in every few years to understand, has it gotten better? Are we going in the right direction? So really creating the framework for ongoing truth and healing, which we're starting to understand is kind of a cyclical process of, you know, we started with the biggest thing and that's done, but now there's 10 other things that people are thinking about, and we need to keep kind of healing over and over and over until everybody is done. And it's gonna take a long time. It took a long time to get us here, so it's gonna take a long time to disentangle it. And also part of this process that's been coming up is that there is a very critical need, and I don't know how to address this, so maybe people have ideas, to address lateral oppression, lateral violence, and create a new space for ourselves as Native people to be able to thrive, because we're seeing a lot of the crab pot mentality all over the place. It's with non-fed, it's with fed, it's internal to fed, it's you know, disenrollment. It's so much of this othering of people who all survive the same thing, and it seems to be kind of trauma playing out over and over and over, to the point where like the non-Indians don't even know we exist anymore, and we're continuing to keep each other down. So again, thinking about how we work together to celebrate each other, bring each other all along, and frame this effort. Part of why we structured it this way from the state perspective was this is the common thing that all California Native people have, and it's the common enemy that all California Native people have. Loretta and I didn't work for the state willingly. We thought there was a lot of potential, but we know the state has been really problematic ongoing. And so having a common enemy, we thought that this could be a process to bring people together. We know that the effort that it's gonna take is gonna be different for each person. If you are disenrolled from a non-federally organized tribe, it's gonna take a lot more for you to be made whole. We know that. If you have no land, a lot more to be made whole. If you have no land in an area that non-natives like to be, way more effort to be made whole. That is a more kind of like high level overview of why this is what it is. We have the 1997 report on our website. That is a congressional report. It was made by the federal government. We provided that so that everybody would have a common background and a common kind of understanding of the issues that Congress, through their examination, found in 1997. It is pre widespread gaming in California, which happened in 1999, but really 2000. And so when you read it, you'll also notice that there are, if you haven't read it yet, or if it's been a while, you'll notice that there are some things that haven't changed a lot, and then there's some things that have gotten worse because the economic disparities have created a lot more infighting. And then there's some things that may have improved because more laws are in place for protections. So we put that there as a resource for the community, but also if there are pieces of that that you think we should incorporate into this bigger report from the state side, it is a federal report, but it does have, you know, it has history of California Indians, kind of how we all got here. It has a section on the unique circumstances of non-federally recognized tribes. Disenrollment at the time was way less rampant, so there's not a lot of discussion on that, and I think that's something that probably needs to be addressed. And I don't know that we call it disenrollment, because then we need to find a common language where people can come together and talk about these issues without, you know, getting angry or shutting down. So that report is there. If there are recommendations that should be implemented from that are applicable to the state as well, let us know. But part of this process is, like, from our hats on the state side, we don't wanna be assuming anything. We don't wanna be kind of, like, we don't wanna reinvent the wheel if it doesn't need to be reinvented, but if it does, happy to do that, and we wanna make sure it reflects where everybody is at today. The second piece, because I know the 1997 report was brought up, there's actually, and I didn't know this existed, so I'd like to connect folks to the extent that they're interested in connecting, but there is a small nonprofit that was created in 2018 to hold the federal government accountable to that report and its recommendations. They're mostly focused on the federal government, but we're gonna be kind of working in tandem to the extent that they need our help, or we need their help. Because in California, there's not really a way to kind of disentangle the federal and the state responsibility in some spaces. The second piece of that, and this is something that I need to do a little bit more research on, is they're right now looking into public domain allotments and how that works in tandem with trust lands and acquiring lands for Native people generally in California. So that's something that we'll look at too. Updates are, there are several subcommittees, they're ongoing and they're open. So if you haven't joined a subcommittee and you would like to, we would welcome your joining. Right now they're in the stages of kind of discussing amongst each other how they'd like to meet, what they find most important to meet. And we're gonna be putting together about like a list of to-dos. Basically they're framing why their issue is important right now, and a few other things. But we also would like each subcommittee to come up with a few recommendations for the council. And so to the extent that subcommittees also need research support, please let us know what you'd like us to look into, and we can have Jason track some stuff down, or track some people who will know where to find that stuff. Similarly, I think he mentioned this, but he's also on the problematic names committee at the federal government, and that's for derogatory names. It's not necessarily people who committed. Do you want to?
I can.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the committee is called the Advisory Committee on Reconciliation and Place Names. And it was formed at the time that the executive order, or the secretarial order to remove the S word from the entire national map came down. And I think that the secretary's idea in creating this committee was to explore other words that should not be on the map. There's only 3 words that have been removed from the national map in the history of this country. One of them is the N word. That happened in the early 1960s. One of them is the J word for a Japanese person, and that happened in the mid-1970s. And then the S word happened last year. It kind of tells you something about the list of priorities. We were talking about a number of other words. The D word, which is used for people in Northern California in particular, is one that I'm pushing pretty hard to be off the map. And there's features all over the state with that name. But we are actually discussing problematic figures as well. The problem with that is that making these sweeping moves, like for a derogatory name, it's indefensible to have derogatory names on the map. You can't say, oh, it's our heritage to use this dirty word. But for a lot of other, the one I bring up a lot is Stonewall Jackson, who's a Southern Confederate general, and there's 800 features around the country named Stonewall. Most of them, I think, after him. Maybe sometimes it's just a stone wall, which is one of the problems there. You have to find the derivation. One of them is the Stonewall Inn National Historic Site in New York City, which is where the LGBT movement started in 1969. And two of them are in state parks, and I'm trying to restore native names to them. Now, the reason why you don't want a secretarial order coming down saying Stonewall's off the map, we're not honoring Confederates anymore. Well, when you say that, it becomes a national issue. So the work that I'm trying to do in San Diego County and Placer County becomes national news, and there's going to be a lot of people in Alabama and Mississippi who like their Stonewall Gorge or their Stonewall Creek, and they suddenly come in with a local issue. So we're trying to figure out on the committee how best for the department that the intention is to have to remove names from the map that are impacting people, that are keeping people out of our parks and our natural wilderness spaces, and that are making people feel uncomfortable, unwelcome, that are triggering intergenerational trauma. And things that are named after people who did horrible things are also, they're problematic, but it's just a different approach. So I have a lot of ideas about how the Department of the Interior can support this work. It's just that completely sweeping something off the map from above, like was done with the escort, isn't the right approach, in my opinion, or I think anybody's opinion, when we're talking about figures like John C. Fremont, John Sutter, Leland Stanford. I'm just naming California figures that had their names on a lot of stuff that did some really, really, really terrible things to this community. It's more of a, it takes a little more finesse, it takes more community engagement, it can be done, and we are doing it.
Thank you. So just very quickly, the subcommittees that are open are the Elders Council, the Youth Council, and both of those are basically representative, but also capturing the unique issues of what those struggles are as elders or youth. So if I'm an elder and I can't access the place where I need to go gather, and there's issues with my ability to go online and do things I need, that people are requiring me to do, that's a lens for access, gathering, and the like. Youth, similarly, like if I'm frustrated by the fact that my language is not accessible to me in the way that other languages are accessible to other people, and those languages are not indigenous languages, that is a lens for language access that the youth would bring. Education, that is both the status of education in Indian country in California. So are our kids getting educated with the same quality and standards that they need to be in order to thrive? So are they getting access to their cultural education? Are they getting access to their languages? And are they also thriving in schools? Or are there issues? Are they being singled out? Are they uncomfortable because they're being singled out? Do they learn better through oral transmission? Are there things that are not being accommodated for them? But also, how are we talking about Native people in our education systems? So our curriculum, are we being siloed as a piece of history, or are we being taught within political science as another jurisdiction? Are we being taught within the sciences as also another, like a life science? Even in art, are our kids able to learn about our arts and how to do that within the school system without having to kind of have people volunteer their time, unpaid? We have a People with Disabilities subcommittee as well, a Status and Identity subcommittee. So that's the lens of how is it harder or different not having federal recognition or not being a member of a federally recognized tribe in accessing the things that you need to access. it can also mean, you know, in California, are you able to fully own and express your identity, free from having to explain yourself? Your kids have to explain what it means to be Indian in school. Do you have to explain that your tribe is an Indian tribe in California? Just anything that like is on top of what anyone else would have to experience on a daily basis in California. Urban communities, again, that's the urban experience of California Indians. And again, this whole process is focused on California Indians. I think from the state perspective, we acknowledge that there's a highest priority to California people, indigenous people of this land. And I know indigenous is not the term of preference, but I'm just saying it, you know, for common understanding, but native people of this land. And then those are the ones that are currently open. So in urban communities, you know, is there access to your, free and open access to your land? Like, could there be programs like Birthright, where you get to go back to your homelands and learn about your culture? Is there open access to your languages? Do you feel seen in urban areas, or are other native priorities kind of overtaking California and Indian spaces? So, I've been doing quite a lot of talking, but you can all sign up for those subcommittees, and then they're kind of all deciding how to convene, how to create focus, and we'll have another webinar on that in the near term. Is there anything I should?
To sign up for the subcommittees, we have little brochures. There's a QR code on there, and if you have any difficulties with signing up through the Google form, just let us know, and we can add you to the list. And so just scan that. They'll take you to the Google form, put your name, your email, and which subcommittee you're interested in, and then you'll be included on the list.
I'll also note that for some things, they don't have to wait till 2025 for us to start trying things out. So one good example is something we've heard pretty consistently throughout this process is that land and co-management and access needs to be a priority. That's why there is now $101 million set aside for tribal nature-based solutions and 30 by 30. That can mean a lot of things. It can mean tribal access in certain areas. It can mean tribal gathering in certain areas. It can also mean tribal purchases of certain areas. And the limitation, because it's the state and the legislature never authorizes anything without exceptions, is that it does have to be for general conservation purposes, or needs to be some sort of like nature-based solution. So if it's gathering, if it's cultural burning, if it's anything that is nature-based, we've even had a couple of beaver reintroduction pilot programs that have been funded. So the things that we're hearing in these spaces, if there's something that you're just like, this really just like, this can't wait, we need it now, we know where it needs to go, like, we can start doing that, and then as those programs roll out and we see issues with them, we can refine them and have what those refinements need to be in the final report too. Anything else? Sure. So, in addition to these listening sessions where in a moment we'll just be hearing from all of you, but we have quarterly meetings, so there's 4 required a year, and those are over multiple days. They tend to be from about 9 or 10 to about 5 or 6, and are split up between local tribal testimony and whatever the local tribes want us to have a bigger focus on. So some tribes will ask for presentations on the Indian Child Welfare Act because that's particularly important to them. Some will ask on presentations about how to create capacity to transfer lands. Some will ask for us to talk a bit more about cultural resource protection or the Native American Graves Protection or Repatriation Act. And then some want to hear about where there have been successful partnerships or successful efforts for some of the things that all of you are wanting to prioritize. So that's ongoing. Our next quarterly meeting is not going to be until December, and that's mostly because I'm leaving on a fellowship that is not associated with this job, but is aligned and will help, I think, this council in New Zealand and Australia to learn more about their truth and reconciliation processes. So similarly, if you all have any ideas about what would be helpful to learn from them and bring back to this process, I would be ecstatic to get those recommendations. But so December 15th, mid-December, we'll be meeting down in San Diego. We also have a documentarian who has been coming to the quarterly meetings. So if you would like to have an elder interviewed or you'd like to be interviewed in the process of all of this, we encourage you to come and let us know that you're coming so that he can interview you. But he's also interviewing kind of the whole process as well. Or he's video documenting the whole process as well. We have also hearings and listening sessions like this. Our next listening session in person will be in Sonoma, near the mission. This is the anniversary of the mission, and so there was some hubbub around that from the local community that wasn't really taking into account the native experience in that space. So that will be on September 15th in the evening around 4 to 7. So that's a Friday. We'll discuss that legacy, but also the Bear Revolt, which was basically kind of the beginning of the California role in the genocide. The Bear, yeah. Anything else I should add?
And we're also always open to coming up and doing regional hearings. If there is a particular issue or focus in your region, we're more than happy to work and schedule with it. I think Cindy and I were emailing back and forth for months to get this on the calendar. So if there is an interest in your community, just reach out and we can do our best to make that happen. We also have ongoing consultations. And so if your tribe would like to request a consultation, we're more than happy to do that as well.
And those, similar to what we've done with some of you already, we'll start with Zoom, so we can give you kind of an idea of what to expect and how to engage. It doesn't have to be Zoom, it can also be in person, but really it's kind of getting your tribe, getting your community kind of familiar with the process so that you can start thinking about what you want your story to be. Because ideally we want to have those stories frame the historical record here. We really love the style of this is, what's it? Oh my gosh, my mind just went completely blank. Professor Bowerly.
We have land.
Or Bower, yeah. We Are the Land. Which is a history, but also includes native histories, so origin stories, things that are very much tied to the land. So we really like that style and want, it's not Bowerly, it's Bower. Professor Willie Bower. Sorry, I'm mixing Kenosha. It's a book.
It's a book.
And it's called We Are the Land. This is not an endorsement, but I think I have 5 copies of it. And it starts with an origin story, and then it weaves in both the history of kind of first European contact in these lands, all the way up to activism on Alcatraz and some of the modern movements. I think someone here is actually quoted in it. Massachusetts. But it really tells a nice story of, and interweaves Native ways of being into the way that Western people document history. And so it's a really good kind of, it's a good energy. And so if you all read it and you all agree, that's kind of what we'd like this story to look like a bit. I will probably stop there, but just kind of mention, like, as I mentioned, a lot of the themes that we're hearing throughout these sessions are, this violent dislocation from the land, and that the land has also been the way that Native people restore community, restore being. A shocking number of stories, which I don't know if everyone else is aware of this, but I think almost every tribe has this story of when they've been relocated by the militia, when their people have been sent to boarding schools, when they have been shipped down in ships to San Francisco Bay for slave market and indenture. The way that everybody who did make it home made it home was that they found the sacred mountain. They looked up, they saw where they needed to go, and they knew where they lived in relation to it. Or they knew where the ocean was, or they knew where their rivers were, and that's how they found home. And so it's been a very, I'm getting really emotional about this, sorry. It's been a really strange experience to hear that from so many communities, that the land actually saved them. And pulled them home. And I think that needs to be a key piece of this story, and is why it's so important to kind of resume that relationship. But, so that's a big piece of it, along with the piece of not knowing what happened to us because those histories were taken from us, and our people were moved all around. So, oh, thank you. I usually just keep it all in, and I don't, even with much, and then people think I'm crazy. But so I think, there's gonna be common themes like that where, there's a reason why we're all still here. And there are things that we need to be rebuilding and building back up for our own well-being and the well-being of our communities. And so just wanted to put that out there. I know that there's gonna be, a lot of you came prepared to say a lot today. I do not come prepared to say so much. But I really look forward to hearing from all of you. Again, we're not strangers to hearing bad things about the state, and that's part of this process. And so if there are things that you want to share today that need to be done better, or there are things that you think need to be done in this process for it to be right, we're open and happy to hear about all of this. So we'll leave it to all of you if anyone wants to say anything.
I'll go to speak here on this. Sort of, I know here in the area of Northern California, the problem we have, California may be helping us with us, but we also have a lot of federal land and property up here that we have to deal with them. And that becomes difficult when you're trying to protect your ceremony and religious sites. And it sometimes depends on the local jurisdiction that has responsibility for it. You indicated that you've had some grants or funding to assist with identifying this. Would that apply to challenging the federal people to get their act together?
I would need to take a look at the grant guidelines, but I don't think there's limitations in that way.
So we could ask support to assist in
also put you in touch with the Deputy Secretary at the Resources Agency who's overseeing the grant funding. It just opened, so she can also help walk you through that program too.
I wanted to kind of, as I'm playing through this in my mind, if there's federal land, significant, places on federal land, I don't think you go to the Forest Service and say, hey, what do you have for sale, right? So you can fund all this, you have all the money in your back pocket, but is there a mechanism to open that door? So it's great to be bad, but there's no, you just can't buy it. It's not for sale. So outside of the, a destination, but that's still not the people's land, right? It's a culturally significant place that's endorsed by the federal government. And so that's like kind of what I'm parsing through. Got the money there, check, follow the grant guidelines, but how do you do something that's outside of the state's purview?
Thank you, I appreciate that. And again, I'm supposed to be listening, but I think that where there are challenges like that, and we need to be asking the feds to be more accountable to everybody and reduce barriers, like that can be part of this process as well. And then the other piece of that I wanted to kind of just put out there, because I would probably cause problems for myself, but
Just say it.
I already has No, it's fine, they won't.
Yeah, brings us off the record.
Is also the challenge of, and I have presentations with our internal team at the governor's office about how a lot of the land investment was actually through the conservation movement under Teddy Roosevelt, and that people were removed, like straight up removed from their homelands to create these like pristine like wilderness spaces. And so when I see movements toward more national monuments, things like that, I appreciate the intent if it is a good intent, but also I think that that's going to be a part of what we'd like to hear, whether that's actually something that tribes think is helpful or whether that's going to keep tribes out of spaces even more.
Maybe I can help you out a little bit. We got land given back to us because one of them is a school and it is an art site. It was a old village there. We own Coxbar School. And another one is out there at Natural Bridge. Out at Natural Bridge, you basically have to prove how you're tied to them. So we became co-managers of Natural Bridge out there. So we take care of Natural Bridge. And then one of our neighbors ended up, because it was another village across from the school, he gave us 80 acres. So you have to prove your ties to that land before you can actually apply to it. And this is all Forest Service. This is all through Forest Service.
Amazing. Sorry, Six Rivers or Shasta Trinity?
Pardon?
Shasta Trinity.
Yeah, this is Trinity, yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment on the transfer of land. Obviously, that's one of my favorite conversations is that, that a lot of land is held by the California governor and obtained through the Extermination Act, specifically because many tribal nations may overlap that certain territory. So I just wanted to say that on that subject. I will be here for like 30 more minutes and then have to go to another meeting, but maybe I should just say what I have to say. Well, I pretty much can go on all day, but I've already had my chance at the other meeting, so I'll let you guys have your chance. Everybody wants to speak. Come on. I know you guys are all full.
You go for it.
Well, one of the things I wanted to request.
Can I ask, just to, and maybe no one has an answer, but does anybody have any good idea of how have a native mechanism to settle up the land stuff, because it's not just overlapping lands, it's like now we have tribes that they're all actually, like 3 of them have the same.
Right, and they're also purchasing land in other territories, so it gets very complicated, but just as what we're doing here, I feel like at the end of the day, consultation is key. It's going to the people and asking them themselves, how do we do this? And having working groups to try to work through it and figure out the best path, because these are very complicated subjects.
And the one snag I will just bring up is, you know, as with kind of all consultation and all government engagement, folks that have greater capacity are gonna get a greater voice and facilitate greater relationships. And so how do you kind of account for that?
Well, so.
50 acres for every
So
tribe.
I am privy to a lot of spaces, and I will say that, just because of my dad. Thank you, Dad. We have a responsibility as a people to alert our people or bring them in and try to fill those spaces. And if they can't be there, then we have to try to be that voice for them, and that's actually, and I'm just talking from an individual point of view, going to our people and consulting them. And that's what I try to do when I do the work. Now, from this standpoint on a massive scale, so I have a job, I'm able to travel today, but when we did go to Trinity, I was alerted that I was on the committee 2 weeks prior, and I happened to be on vacation the day of the meeting, and the meeting was said that it was mandatory in Trinity County, which I at the time was in Santa Cruz. So me and my family took a trip up to Trinity, which is fine. It's just an extended vacation for us. We like Trinity. We had wanted to visit Trinity, so it was a nice little excuse. Although I have a family of many kids, it costs us $400 a night to rent a hotel just to try to bed all of them. And it's just a very costly venture, and I could see how that could deter many people to be able to attend these convenings. One, there was no financial support for a hotel or travel. And so I was really sad because I felt like a lot of our people weren't able to be there as a result of not having those funding streams to assist them should they need that. And even in my own committee, I was the only individual there for my committee, and I know that we were supposed to write this document, and I couldn't even do that because it would have been extremely biased if only I had written the document and I had no other committee there. And that might have been due to financial support, I'm not sure. It could have been scheduling, could have been a multitude of issues, but I think that would help with trying to bring those voices in. And I like that you guys are going all through California and even into these areas that are more rural, because a lot of issues a lot of convenings always happen in the larger cities. So I was kind of happy about that because usually I don't have to really go that far. And this one was nice. I felt happy for the people here in Weaverville that didn't have to travel all the way to Redding. But I think just the Zoom option is also nice, and just really getting this out there and trying to share it with as many people as possible, and letting them know that there's a multitude of options to work in this space. Hope that answers the question, sorry.
Well, she brings up a very good point. With everyone that's not recognized, a lot of them are misfortunate that they don't have a stream source of income to attend these meetings. They're always during the middle of the week. And if you have to work, you have to take time off, you have your own business, you have to close your business. And lot of government agencies don't understand. We provide our own transportation, we provide our own accommodation. And, sorry, the hosts are reimbursed or paid on their time to be here as part of their duties and responsibilities. We're here because we see the importance of the nature of the movement.
And you lose money because we're here for that.
So,
I'm wondering, because you have a list of resources for a lot of different things, could you put something like, because you probably can't get the funding necessarily, it's like always, where does money come from? But could you put a list of resources like Indian Collective, you know, Indian Philanthropy? I mean, because they do provide internships, grants, and maybe there can be a relationship between this group and those groups. And do they even know this is happening, that, you know, they can contribute to that? I don't know, I'm just asking. Yeah.
Sure, I think we can put a bigger list, just as a resource for the community. We also have an affiliated, but not under our control, grant fund as well. So we're gonna check in with them also to see if they're gonna open another round of funding, because we've had a couple of groups really benefit from that funding and have been able to come to a lot of the meetings as a result. And now that more people are engaged, I think it's a perfect time to reopen that grant funding opportunity. So the answer is yes, we'll put together other resources, because again, I think, you know, the state does have a lot of challenges in being able to, you know, directly fund community. But we have partnered with philanthropy, and we can, to the extent that there are other organizations that would fund this as well, we can put those as well.
Because I am one of those who closes my shop down and travels out, not recognized, but I love being here. So,
We have 3 tribes right here sitting at the table that are unrecognized in the same bucket. Yes, this is awesome. Very good.
Well, I think it's also fair to say that a lot of people that do this kind of work, they do it on their own. You know, you don't always get support from the tribe to be able to go to these kinds of meetings. It depends on if you're that person who wants to go and get involved and be there. But it does make a hardship on you when, you know, you have to travel and you're traveling on your own dollar. I know I was on the governor's work group for the CTHC and ICWA, and they always, I mean, it wasn't a lot, but it was a small stipend, and they have put that in their budget, you know, for mileage, or you could either get mileage or you could get a hotel, you know, going to Sacramento. But I think those are some things that we should look at for, this is a deadline of 2025, and you're doing outreach now, and especially the very rural communities. I think it's all tribes, you know, are gonna need assistance. If you wanna get those stories and you wanna get their story, you've gotta make it possible for people to get there. And I think also for tribes to be communicating, and, you know, I know Rancheria does a lot in the community, you know, the space, they provide a lot of, like yesterday, we went to the meeting last night, and it was a really productive meeting. You know, they had food, it was a nice location for those of us that could come at the last minute. But I think that's the other thing, is making sure that the information is shared, because sometimes the communities to address these issues of mental health, drug abuse, you know, the children that are being removed, and the communities are the ones who are solving and being a part of the solution. It's not people, like I said, coming in thinking they're gonna save you. It's the people that have to come up with that, and the people have to do the work. And I feel so strong about that. So I'm really glad that you're going to New Zealand. But BIA did put that pilot program, it's pretty thick, you know, so it's a lot of reading, but it's really good. And I really try to bring that to the attention of some of the people when I was on council, but there's gonna be funding tied with that. And one of the things I've learned is follow the dollar, you know, follow the dollar, because that's gonna tell you where those programs are gonna be, and what you wanna do in your communities.
What pilot program is that?
I'll have to look it up, it's in my notes, but I have your email, and so I'll send it to you, and it's a very thick document.
Thank you. One thing related to that, I know we have more comments, is kind of what I'm trying to figure out from there and from Australia is whether the legal mechanism that we have set up under federal Indian law is actually like I don't wanna say hurting, cause I think sovereignty is like, it's a thing and we need to hold on to it, and it's nowhere else in the world do we have governmental status. But I also wonder to what extent has it siloed programs, created more division, created less public awareness of the issues that we have, and fewer kind of cross-community solutions, because it's gonna depend on the individual tribe and its resources, and then you also create with gaming, there's the competition. But I would love to, see that report, and then also kind of think through that a little bit too.
Sorry, it's the last time, so I gotta go. You guys are probably like, she talks too much. Another thing that we did recently is we had a kind of like a healing convening amongst our people. And we saw that there were barriers with a lot of our people as far as going to certain locations. So we had to remove those power structures and take them to a neutral location. And let me tell you, it was amazing. Our people showed up and they contributed, and the way we did it was we kind of had them, we put them into working groups, and they were able to write on leaves. I don't know if you guys seen how they have this system where they identify issues, and then how do we heal from them, and what does the future look like. And I felt like doing that, we were able to get really into the issues, because it wasn't like being on a microphone and someone could directly pinpoint that individual said this, or, it was very nondescript. And so it worked well for us, but that might be an idea. I know that a lot of individuals have issues sometimes with the gaming tribes, and that may be rooted in a multitude of issues, but I know that a lot of events happen at gaming tribal nations, casinos and event centers and whatnot, because they have the funding. But it would be good if, once again, I'm sorry, I know you guys probably don't have a lot of funding, I know it's just a small crew. But maybe that should be another committee, if somebody working on getting you guys more support and getting some funding to have neutral spaces. I actually work for Rancheria, so I don't really have an issue in that respect, but I'm just saying that might be an issue for some. And something to think about when you're talking about trying to open up these spaces, and how do we get more people involved and feel like they're able to come be a part of that. So anybody else?
Thank you, we love that idea.
Anybody?
If there are ideas too about how to facilitate anonymous submissions while also making sure that it's California Native people, I think we'd love ideas about that too. I got it.
Like my tribe or our tribe or whatever tribe, UC Berkeley has a bunch of our stuff. And it takes an act of Congress to try to get it back. They're actually working on it, but they have it and they don't want to let it go. It's been there since, I don't know, the earth was developed, but we did get some stuff back, but it was sent to Redding Rancheria. And luckily Redding Rancheria sent it to us, and we buried them up there on the lake. But they think Redding Rancheria, they're descendants of us, yeah, we're all related, but we're here in Weaverville, and I don't know why they confused the two tribes. You're a descendant of, all of that. You are no wrong point too, but you're Redding Rancheria. And that's one of my big issues is UC Berkeley. We have a heck of a time getting our stuff from them. We got boxes and boxes and boxes of records there. And we're gonna have a heck of a time to get them.
just to add to that, it was a little discouraging because here it's not just Berkeley, it's all the other UCs that notify us that they have our items, and even the funerary items, we cannot get anything ourselves. It has to go through a federally recognized tribe, and that is just genocide all over again. I think. I mean, it's just horrible. You're saying that this belongs to you, but we're not going to give it to you because you're not recognized, but we'll give it to your neighbor. So I just wanted to add that. That's really heartbreaking. I mean, we are getting our items back, and thankfully we have the great relationship that we do with the Rancheria, but it's just discouraging because we get contacted by these UCs and they're all about it, and until they find out that you don't have any federal recognition.
I'd like to throw another thing. We have river restoration here. They're up here by the fishing game, give them a whole bunch of money, and we have graves there. And we had a meeting here probably about a year and a half ago. I pointed them all out. Well, they already did cat work through there. We have graves there. And in the fishing game, a lot of these departments, Forest Service, state parks, fishing game, they all know about these areas, but yet they'll let somebody else go work in them. We don't get a chance to work in our own area. So that's really, it's going to change eventually, but right now we can't really do anything about it.
I just like to, some thoughts go through the head is all this stuff. I'm nervous with the, so a lot of the stuff that that's going through the head is this tribal, non-recognized tribe to the federal government, right? And just this instance right here is a great case to where you can say, how about California recognizes formally tribal people? That way, California knows who to release, just like this one with the university. They can't give it to just anybody. So I understand that you default to federal recognition. But if the state went back and said, you are formally recognized tribes of California, then that would alleviate one of those.
Well,
We are a state.
We are recognized by California. It don't mean that literally nothing.
Yeah, so at least with repatriation, Cal NAGPRA defers to the NHC list. NAGPRA is the issue, because as far as the federal government is concerned, their laws do not apply to non-federal recognized tribes.
Okay, sure. So it's a formal recognition process for California tribes.
Yeah, and it only happens if you have a federally recognized tribe basically saying, we're gonna get it and then we'll give it to you.
Any federal pet river who bought it, they can get it for us and bring it to us.
Even the Europeans can get it for us.
Yeah, and then it depends on, and then it just depends on them doing the right thing.
And your relationship, I'm sure.
One of the things I haven't heard is discussion of public law 280. And I think that's another big area for California tribes, whether recognized or unrecognized, but the public law 280. And when you were talking about things that impact us, that is one of them that impacts many tribes on things that we're trying to do. So I know that has, I want to say that we tried to retrocede Public Law 280. We were not successful, but I think that's another area that needs to be discussed with tribes in California.
Thank you. And there is, I believe, an effort at the federal level under Senator Padilla to look into PL 280. But your point is well taken. And one thing that I've been thinking about in structuring this work, we were thinking about doing task forces, but I think we just don't, I don't know that, we'll see about that. But another recommendation that's come up is to have like issue-specific summits that everybody can come talk about one specific issue. So like criminal justice, and it's like a day or two in a central location or in 2 locations, where it's like everybody can come and talk out the issues. We have the experts in the room and we can kind of get through all of it in one day, where it's because it came up in the context of land, and like what are the different types of land in California, what are the big issues here, who has land, who doesn't, why is this an issue, and really looking at it from kind of a holistic perspective. And then having those experts follow up with whatever the outcomes were and the recommendations, and kind of fielding that to the community. And I think that may be a more efficient use of people's time where everybody can kind of come together, but I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, I like that because I know that some of us that have a trust land in our family, you know, as you go down the application and you see the history, the documentation, when you try to follow up on that, it's been lost. They don't know where it's at. But there is a document, and I think that's another area, you know, how do we resolve that? What steps need to be taken?
Can I ask, because there's a few folks in the room who've mentioned this in other contexts, did the BIA or Interior do anything to follow up on lost records, or is it just like?
The BIA just said it's lost.
So that to me feels like a failure of the trust responsibility that actually is like a legal issue. So we'll write that down.
I have an example of that with working with Trinity in designating a religious site. We've been working on it for 20 years. And the problem I see there, it's twofold. Is number one, is the individuals in charge of the local agency that work with us, they rotate out of their job every 2 to 3 years. Then that history is lost. We've gotten to the place, like I said, we've been dealing 20 years. The original agreements and things, they've lost their records of it even. We can't find it. Do you have anything to give us? So it just keeps perpetuating, and we're not any closer than when we started 20 years ago. And it's getting worse because of people wanting to encroach upon the properties.
Well, and also like to what extent does the local county have any, like?
No, it's not the local county, it's the local federal representatives.
So I have a comment, because I grew up living around the people tribe. But I do know for a fact that when the BIA left the agency, they took a lot of documents to their dump that used to be right there on the river. And my brother and sister's grandmother went and dug through them. And in digging through a lot of this documentation and paperwork, she found a lot of things on the Iraq people. And she shared that with our Iraq attorneys and the family members that were working on this. And so having that and being able for the family to take it to their attorney to be able to fight for our recognition, because they tried to destroy everything, all of the documentation, so that we could not be recognized. So for me, I know that, you know, she had half-burnt papers and different information from that dump. So, you know, I think that a lot of the local tribes that were within the agency at that time, a lot of their paperwork was destroyed because of that. And I do know that as a fact, because it was my family that did that.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Just because I'm nosy.
So, is it JC?
That's me, yeah.
So my question is, since you work for the state parks, correct?
Yeah.
We work with Victor out of the state parks.
Great guy.
Very, very close. He is our hero. We have honored him. He's an awesome guy. But my question is for the local tribes within this area, does the park set aside, like the lumber, the material, the trees and stuff that are used to build like their roundhouse or their ceremonial things? Because I know with working with Victor, he has worked with the Yurok, the Wiyot, the Trinidad. So when a tree falls in the redwoods, they're taken and set aside so that the local tribes there are able to use those resources. So I was just wondering if this is something that you have set up for the tribes so that they would be able to have access to that material so that when they're ready to build their ceremonial projects, that this is something that can be worked with you in order to help this happen.
Victor has a big cold neck of redwood. And that's where I've been for almost the last 2 weeks, splitting pine and building this. I got some pictures, I'll go get it if you're interested in seeing it. This is all from Victor. He donated, state parks donated this all to us, to the clinic. In other words, to the clinic.
To the local tribes.
To the local tribes. Now, I wasn't a local tribe, but I've been on the coast for wherever. I was born in Humboldt County, so I consider myself as a local tribe.
You're still around.
Yeah. I brought that.
Yeah, we were raised.
Very you're on.
So, I'll answer the question. First off, I really don't know what the policy is with things like salvaged wood from forest properties that Parks has. And in fact, the first person I would actually ask this question is Victor.
It's a wonderful resource.
But I mean, I know that a lot of that kind of thing is done in the system. I don't know if it's a policy or not, but I know that, generally, like when there's something like remodeling, like an old sawmill or something like that, they'll try to use salvaged lumber that was produced in the process of, say, taking out trees after a fire. I know that we do a lot of stuff like that. I just don't know what the departmental policy is or if there's any barriers or anything to that kind of, and Victor is the first person I would ask, so.
Yeah, and I think that it's typically on a regional basis, which is like a very frustrating thing because it depends on the regional person in charge. Typically there are MOUs in place for that type of thing. And Yurok has the Yurok tribe, sorry, we promised someone we'd start saying the Yurok tribe, for clarity, has a pretty expansive MOU relationship with state parks. But I think that to the extent that that's not common practice, we would be happy to have that be something that is done more throughout the state system.
Yeah, this is actually, this is being built at the United Indian Health Services Clinic. So it is a clinic project, it's not a tribal project, but we have the tribal elders and actually it's on Wiyot land, so we have our Wiyot chairman and he sits on our committee, and so he has a lot of input on it, but one of our Yurok elders is also one of the ones that's heading the project. So yeah, there is a lot to it, but I just was curious just because I know that, I'm sure that all of you are looking to do the same on your own lands, and I was just curious as to if they had that in play.
Yeah, and I would like to also reiterate Christina's point that state parks has a very regional structure. We have districts with superintendents, and some of them are Victor and some of them are not. But the really good thing about that, despite some of the limitations, is that when you have a leader who is piloting a lot of really innovative, good stuff in one district, and then you also have leadership at the state level that are interested in implementing that. You have a model, you have something to show other people internally. So if there's another district, well, no district is as far along, I can say that's North Coast Redwoods. we can show other districts that, and they see, they see our weekly digest, they see what's happening up there, they see all the, the media, the visitorship that's increasing because it changes the parks that make them more relevant to the community, and other people who want to follow. So that's all I can really say at this point is that, when good things are happening in one place, we do have the means to sort of try to propagate them other places, even if it isn't just top-down control.
I was just gonna say, can you check on?
I was gonna ask if you could check into that, for us, because we are wanting to put a roundhouse out at, where Cox Bar School was. It is now, we renamed it the Trinity River Natives Cultural Center. And so we opened that up to all the natives along the Trinity River. And hopefully someday soon, we are gonna have a place to store our baskets and our artifacts and all of that there at the Cultural Center. And so we just held our first annual gathering out there and had a blast. We have our seal or bark house out there now, but we do want to build a roundhouse. And we also have timber that we could use of our own, but and then the 78 acres that we're in escrow with right now, getting land back. There's a house and cabin on the property and a creek that runs through it, and so there will be a herb garden, cultural plants. It's a place that we hope we can bring our people out and spend time there, but that would be very interesting, Jason. If you could find out, I would be very interested.
My cell phone number, so you can get in touch with me. I don't know if I have your.
I think I've heard on our app.
You have, okay, so one of us will help.
Okay, thank you so much.
Not really a question, just something I feel like needs to be said in my heart, just, burning within me. I'm sitting here and I'm listening and I kind of spinning, here we are trying to figure out how we can fit within the parameters of laws that aren't our laws, ways that are not our ways, and it hurts. I'm a federal Indian law, tribal self-government scholar, and I went to school so I could understand those things because I kept feeling like I was hitting my head against the wall. And then I just, after studying all those things and like sitting in offices in DC and hearing all the things and thinking about, oh, we can do this and we can do this, and feeling like it's just so wrong. It's all just so wrong. All these laws enforced and implemented over our people in our lands are not just. They're not actually even legal. The doctrine of discovery has no teeth, has no standing. It's unconstitutional, number one, because in order to have any teeth, it had to have been done to establish religion, right? So we know this. I don't know, I was just thinking about it and I just wanted to say, our places where we come from, they are what make us who we are. Humans, human beings from these places, they are the center of the universe for us. They orient us. And that's the healing. That orientation, that reorientation out of all of these structures that have been placed upon us, forced upon our minds, on our beings, on our bodies, on our relatives. That's what needs to be addressed. I don't have to come here and align the laws. you know, that's how it feels, and then you're like, oh, you're such a rebel, and you're what, but this is where Creator put us. That is the ultimate law. That's what we have accountability to. And I just sit here and listening, oh, we can, I mean, California can let go of PL 280. You know, they could say, we don't want it. They could relinquish it if they really wanted to. It's the truth. I don't know. That's what needs to be talked about. We need to talk about sovereignty, and I'm not talking about pseudo-sovereignty under the guise of federal plenary power. It's all under might makes right. You know, they got the power, so they assert it, and we have to line up under it because what, you know, they could do to us, what they could take from us. We're strong, we're resilient people, human beings, you know. And our healing is in our medicine, our healing is in our connection to the land, to our relatives. You know, I'm from Redding, California, and I've been gone for about 4 or 5 years now, just going to school. And you know, there's so much homelessness in our own homelands, lots of our own relatives. And our own people can't even take care of our own relatives. You know, we don't even have a place. Our own place. I'm just speaking as a Winter person, you know, in Redding, we go up on the other side of the mountain, and I can speak, you know. I've been told, oh, you are in rural Pipper, you can't speak as a Windu. Well, I beg to differ with you. I don't really care what they think or say. Like I said earlier, because federal law does not define who I am. I know who I am, where I come from, where my people come from. But it's painful, you know. So, I don't know why I'm saying all that. I just felt like it needed to be said. We don't need to line up and fall under all the rules that the state, you know, try to exterminate our people. You know, I mean, right there in Shasta County in the that Whiskey County, you know, the heads of our relatives were brought there, you know, in the county seat by militiamen who it was more lucrative for them to collect the heads of our people, the scalps of our people, than to dig for gold, you know, and that, what's it called, Old Shasta, sorry, I'm kind of, you know, still stands in places like, you know, a place of genocide that shouldn't even be celebrated. Let's start tearing some of those places down. Let's start calling our places, you know, our sacred mountains. You know, we need to call them by their names that they are. Those are our places. That's where Creator put us and gave us the names for those places. They orient us. Every place, you know, has a Western name. You know, all of our places have to have our own names because they recognize themselves by that, and you know, they recognize us, those places. That's our healing, that's our wellness. We have to reorient and upright and turn it over. The settlers came in and they turned over our villages. You know, we have to reorient, and that is, what's important. I could sit here and talk to you about the law all day long, but that isn't really our law. That isn't our way. That's not who we are, you know. If I say I'm a Daisy this, that means I'm a person that comes from the Big Bend in the river, the human being that comes from there. If I say I'm a Wintu, that means I'm a human being. If I say I'm from, Winnemem, that means my people come from the Cloud River, the middle water, a human being. And that's what's in my heart. That I don't know how we get there. Nobody ever wrote a book on how to survive and thrive after genocide. But we have to, as people, it's sad because it's like we would have to write our own history, we have to tell everybody, they've completely erased it from all the history books and everything, we have to stand up, and it's hurtful and it's hard to say, this or that happened, and it's re-traumatizing, it's reliving genocide, over and over and over and over and every day you feel like you're putting out fires all around you. And all know and understand that. We have so much, hurt and pain and division amongst our own people, our own relatives, the haves and the have-nots, the ones with land, the ones without, the ones with money, the ones without. It's just all across everywhere. It's ugly, it's hurtful. And, I don't know, it is smart. That's what I want to contribute. We have to reorient the way we think, remember ourselves as people from where we're from. And I know that we're doing that, but I don't know, I don't want to fit within the guidelines of federal Indian law that's actually invalid, has no footing, with the exception of they put their law on us. Even California law, I don't want to fit within all that, and yet we have to. Because why? Because we are sovereign nations, and we take the crumbs that we can get, that they'll allow us to have, even though we're in, self governance, and all that. But how many of our relatives, don't have a right to say anything when some group of different ones that were created by the government can have a say, and our other people can't. The rightful ones, who are supposed to have the say for land, to speak for our ancestors, and the government created this other tribal entity that can speak, that has people from outside of our area. That's painful. I don't know what you can do with that, but you need to write it up, turn it up, reorient to the way we think about all these things. So thank you, and I just thank you, honor all you guys for being here, and
I think that was really well said, and I think we're also trying to, if I'm gonna be super real right now, I've actually been struggling with this same thing when I'm approaching my fellowship. I don't know that you can dismantle and create healing in a space where you're all still subservient to a colonial structure. So know that we're thinking about it, and I think we're kind of in the space of you have to start somewhere. You've got to get all the people who are here that don't actually know that they're here in a way that has been unjust to own that before you can even kind of dismantle those structures and create a new future. And so I really appreciate your words, because I think it's something all of us think about. And I'm really glad that you said that today. I also think if we can be thinking too about what does that future look like in California, given how much destruction there's been and how much we have reorganized for survival? Like, what do we look like in the future? Like, what do we want our future for our kids to be? Do we want them to be in basically gated communities and like have no connection to their people and their land? Do we want, what do we want for them? And what do we want for the land? So I think really, really love what you contributed here today, and I think we're gonna be thinking about it a lot as this moves forward.
Good.
First, I want to thank you, Sister, for bringing that to the table, to the center, to the circle, representing the circle, and doing that, speaking from the heart, because that is us, that's the people, whether we have land or not, whether we're recognized or not, and then, listening to every question that you ask at the meetings that I've been to that just go very, very deep inside. I have to stand, I'm sorry, because it just, because that's what it does. I mean, it causes us to stand on our land. My aunt has said the same thing to me when I was 20 years old. And she was standing in a grapevine, eating grapes from a winery from the land that was hers. And she turned around and she looked at me and she said, "What are you gonna do to turn all this around?" And I had said to them before that I believe that this is part of it. I don't just believe it in my mind, I feel it in my heart, and I feel it in my body, and I see it in both of you. Each time I come here, I see it in both of you. That you guys are doing all that you can to be that, not even that bridge, but to be real. I mean, to be the real Hinkville, to be the real, whatever Indian name represents, you both are doing that. And so I want to thank you, for my people behind me and my people going forward and all of us here. And that in that question that you were asking, what does it look like and what can we do as state people? Well, in listening to what you said, what about taking some of those principles that we live by and bringing them into the state, and saying to Gavin Newsom, these are the principles that we as First Nations people live by. Let's bring these into the state. How can we do that? It's like, how can we do that within the administration and let that grow and grow and grow? Maybe you can figure that out. It's like, whether it's like efficiency, what are some of the, we can just like name some of the things that we do, that are principles that we live by, and letting the government live that way, letting the organizations in the government live that way, so that our travel is not so far and the reorientation is not so far, that those who become educated, our children behind us, can recognize within the state government, that's me, that's my people there in that principle of life. So that's what, sister, you brought forward, and I want to thank you for saying that, because we can't change the government, we can't change those laws, and we don't want to live by them. So let's bring them in, like you two before us are sitting there bringing it to their awareness as well. And then we had the other question about how those who don't speak, where, how can they have a vehicle to speak? What about point people that, do come to you, that whether it's within the tribe itself or, other tribes, cross tribes, that those point people receive, the information from those who are more quiet and don't necessarily or can afford or want to come to these meetings. They give that information to the point people and they come and hand it over to you. That's all I want to say. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And I think it has to be a communal effort, that first piece, because it's such a foreign concept to United States born and raised non-native people to prioritize community care, to prioritize well-being and well-being of the land in relation to you as not a separate environment that needs preservation and tending, but as a relationship. And so, you you even see it around you right now with these fires, like that's crazy, this is crazy. And so I think it needs to be kind of that outward push as well that we see from some of the advocates here today so often is like, you know, people need to see an alternative way of being that's better. Like the fact that Western culture just locks elders away and like throws money at a system to kind of figure out what to do is like unconscionable. So I think we'll continue to keep trying, but I also think we need to see those models start to grow and thrive, and I think we can even kind of put that into practice in the recommendations here. For the second piece I want to offer, we do have our iPads, so we will be doing lending out. They're not set up yet is the problem.
It's the same,
but
it's a mission.
I think we can also order recording devices that are not video capable in case people want to just submit oral testimony anonymously. And that way, that's another way to collect without kind of having written submissions or necessarily having a proxy that someone can speak in their own voice what they want to say. We can even have it transcribed, and that way it's vetted, it's submitted by community member, but they don't need to say who they are if they don't want to. Anything else I should out there? Okay. Oh, you got it already.
I just wanted to let you know I have to go get down to Anderson to pick up the grandbaby, and so thank you guys so much, and thank you for your kind words, and thank you guys all for showing up. My goal for Trinity County is to bring our tribes together and our people back together, and I feel like I walked into a hornet's nest not knowing everyone and all their situations. However, over the last 5 years, I have had tribal members come back and re-enroll. I've had people come and talk to me on the side and come back to our events. And so thank you, Shinamwe, thank you, Win-Win, Colleen, Paul, everyone. I really, really appreciate it, and I apologize for running, and I'm sure I'll catch up with you guys later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and he'll take care of anything you need.
Oh, no, don't leave him in charge.
I'll get you.
Well, years ago, I swore I would never be a politician. Now I'm vice chair of a tribe. You have to be a heck of a politician. But some of these issues I've heard, I've had some of these issues, and I brought up to the BIA, and they give me an Indian law book. And then I got an earmark from page 1 to back to 400,000. But some of the land part, what I would like to see, I know you two are attorneys, but what I would like to see is make the federal government more responsible. Because it states federal law, if you have religious, any of your sacred mountains or any place, nobody can stop you from going in there. That is federal law. And that's, but nobody wants to enforce it. A good example out there at Natural Bridge. We had vandalism going on. They painted the rocks. They did all of that. We got all the Forest Service. They have their own cops. Well, we had to take care of it. Forest Service didn't really, oh yeah, well, we got a bunch of money out, but they never showed up. You know, you gotta make the federal system more responsible. And I have another issue. You were talking about some of these names, which are, I agree, you should change them. But you should also state why you changed them. A good example is McKinley on Plaza of Arcata. Overnight, he was gone. Nobody knew why he took him out. Do you know why he took him out? Yeah. He was one of the biggest massacres on the West Coast of all the 80s. And they all got a ticket, all of a sudden, they never said nothing. They just went out and took him out. Nobody knows why they took him out. Nobody even knows the history of him. You know, and stuff like that. Same thing with history of Natural Bridge. Nobody knows really what happened. We all have our theories of what happened, you know, but nobody really knew until we got the clampers. I know Forest Service and Clampers never got along very good, but luckily the head of the Forest Service over here was a Clamper. They came in and put a bronze monument on their own rock and explained what happened, how all the 200 and some people were massacred there. You know, that they put it on a big long plaque, and that's how we became co-managers of Natural Bridge.
I agree with you. I'm a history major too, not just a lawyer. And I think that we do ourselves an injustice when we don't tell the whole story. And it's, you know, it's kind of the whole idea of like, you're doomed to repeat history if you don't learn from it. And so like, just replacing people overnight, it's kind of like when you take out the guy who's been sexually harassing everybody, but you don't tell him, you just say he retired, and then he's just gone. And you remove that learning moment from the dominant culture for them to understand that what they learned was a perspective that dominated and desecrated and just destroyed people. And I guess from my perspective, you know, with this process, you need to elevate the Native voice. Like, what is the story here? But then also, our history books use language in a way, I say ours, and like the United States history books, use language and who's included and who's not included in a way that actually does indoctrinate people. And so, instead of saying, you know, this person with no authority decided because his men were getting antsy that he was gonna go out and he was gonna just kill a bunch of people, and these happened to be these people, and this was a whole community of people who'd lived there since time immemorial. That doesn't actually moralize anything, it just says what happened.
The truth.
Yeah, and you can choose to say, wow, that was crazy and not okay. But you are deprived of that choice if your history book says, this hero, General so-and-so with all of these titles and accolades, went out and defended the American manifest destiny, and like it's a whole different story. And so when our kids read that, they're reading that they were the problem, that their people are the problem, that their people don't exist anymore, and that like they're written out of history. And so like I very much agree with you that you don't just kind of say that didn't happen, you say it happened, but also there were a people that it happened to who defended themselves or who did what they could to defend their places and their lands, or that, you know, that they were starved out of their homelands, and so they did a thing, and that was like paid back times a million, which is cruel, and, you know, would probably be, you know, in violation of war conventions, international conventions. And like, you know, I don't think that you put the modern lens of like, this is right and wrong on things. You just say like, this is what happened, and you have to judge it based on where your society is at this point in time.
On that same token, I just laughed because when they were getting ready to take McKinley out, they interviewed this guy. He was probably 6 years old, and he was a Haight-Ashbury hippie. I ain't joking you. He had and he was on the plaza there. They asked him, "What do you think?" He goes, "I think they ought to build another statue where the Indian put the bow and arrow pointing at it." But that, you know, that never happened. They just came and took it. But he made a point. He knew what happened, but nobody else did.
The ones that they interviewed.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to see our histories of our matriarchies in California. I want to see how women dominated political life. I want to see the women in these stories. Where are they?
Yeah, they sent him home. He's back where he originated from. His statue's up there. Everybody, oh, all right, you're out of Arcadia now. You know. But there's a lot of like U.S. Grant. He had a house in Lupa. How long did you know that?
Yeah.
You do? Yeah. And he also was a lieutenant there at Fort Humboldt. But he was a drunk. Nobody knew that. He was the biggest alcoholic around. That's why he came to Humboldt County. They
You
get
know,
him
all
over there.
Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. Oh, sorry. You, Jason.
Just a policy recommendation would be that, you know, everybody, who holds a public office within the state of California, you know, be educated on, you know, California Indian history. Recently, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I, had the opportunity, I was sitting on the Reading Cultural District, and just kind of randomly had a little, had the opportunity, the city of Reading was developing their downtown specific plan, and it said something like, you know, the history of Reading went, oh, this is a really beautiful place with mountains and rivers and creeks and wildlife and whatnot, and then the city of Reading. That's literally what their narrative was. So I had the opportunity, you know, to collaborate with a few other people, and develop verbiage to, you know, include our people. And when we had gone to the city council had to accept it. Well, one of the councilmen, you know, we had said in there a little bit about our history, didn't say all the dirty details, but even, you know, what we shared was offensive to one of their city council members. And I thought it was actually really nice, what we had written out, but he was like, this is offensive. I didn't remember the word he used because I kind of went blank while he was talking, but yeah, you know, he was like, this is kind of derogatory. I can't remember exactly what he said. You remember the word he said, Lindsay? But yeah, so first time in the city of Reading's city planning documents, you know, they acknowledge our people, even if it's just a little part. But you know, I gave them all a book about Lindsay people, the city council, gifted them all a book, and I don't know if they read it or not, but whatever. But you know, I mean, I think it would be important as policy, as a matter of policy, that, you know, our those in leadership positions learn about our actual history, and the ones even within the counties, you know, learn about their county history. You know, that way when we're engaging with them, you know, they have a little bit of, you know, understanding and empathy, you know, with what they're, you know, dealing with. And a lot of times, you know, I had worked with River, you know, as the ICWA director, and almost got taken to jail because, oh yeah,
Sitting in the sheriff's office.
yeah, sitting in the sheriff's office, and I looked at the sheriff and I said, well,
Take us to jail.
come down here for you, but I'm just letting you know, we have all the authority, you know, that we need to do what we need to do, so you better do some research before you take me to jail, because if you take me to jail, you're gonna be in big doo-doo. I didn't say it. I said, you know, it's a federal law, you know, we have the right, and our council has written a resolution in support of this, and he did his research and he came back, and how long were we in there? A couple hours?
Like half a day. I think it was the vice chair sitting there with her, and they waited for the call to come from Sacramento because they were going to arrest us.
Yeah.
We sat there half a day, but they got the call from Sacramento, and they were all peachy.
Sorry, Mrs. Kravitz, for taking up your time. But see, they don't have any understanding of the laws. Here I was, you know, preaching against law, but really, you know, these things need to be written in policy, that there is understanding. Where we come from, Shasta County, and we're in Trinity County right now, and I'm pretty sure it's pretty much the same over here, you know, but it's a whole different place, you know, and they don't really care to know. And as long as we, I mean, our people have to push and push and push and push and say and say and say, but if the state said, maybe there would be, you know, some reckoning to that, some accountability with that, so.
I like that. I think that's a great recommendation. We should put that in our report. So mentally take some notes, folks. because, we have that issue at the state level generally, but I think a lot of what we hear is that it really comes down to local and county level, where like, no matter what laws we pass that are like statewide, if they don't apply to counties and it's not a county issue, like, stuff just stays the same. So I really love that recommendation.
But along that lines is what I'm talking about. What we're trying to protect is a religious site called Ironside Mountain at this time. We're taking up the cause. Several tribes use this training for their medicine nurses. I had a meeting, more than one with them, but the last, one of the major ones I had with them on what was going on that mountain. And they kept telling me that it's not right, and we'll have to think about applying to a designation of religious site. I said, you don't have to, it's already done. And everybody's saying, no, it's not, including the force supervisor from Trinity, who was there present. And I showed him the document that said it was designated previously, and acknowledged, and they go, oh, well, that's the old regulation. We have a new one. You can't ignore this one. So it's been 3 years that they were going to try to think about getting it converted over. And those are all the records they lost. It's supported it, so where you go. And that's why I'm curious if you're going to help us if we apply for a petition to assist in getting that designation.
I can't speak to that. But if that's a recommendation, we can put that through the process. You know, that getting support for federal processes, we can put that in. Because again, we kind of do consultation on behalf of the council. We kind of host these opportunities for listening, but really it's the governing council that will kind of have the full body of recommendations, which includes chief's desk. So if that's something that you would like to include, we'll put that forward as well as a recommendation.
Hi, in listening to conversations, one of the things I noticed is with the gaming compacts, they require us to work with the cities and the counties. And I have an issue with that, especially considering that we're federal entities, and I don't know why we even have to have a compact with the state of California, or why we have to consult lower governments such as cities and counties, and so I would like that added into this conversation as well. Also, CEQA also requires consultation with the federal tribes. I don't know if there's a provision in there for consultation with non-recognized.
Yeah,
okay.
852.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. But yeah, I used to not be. Anyways, I was just thinking that off the top of my head. Sorry, I couldn't get enough of you guys. No.
We're glad you're back.
I'm glad I could get back.
Yeah, yeah.
I know we're getting close, and I want to thank you guys for this work, and this was a really good meeting. I'm glad I came. But one of the things I heard was, what does it look like for healing? What does that mean? What is it going to look like? How are we going to know that we obtained that goal? And I think that the other piece that needs to be here is our youth. What does that look like for them? What does that look like for our children that have been taught about the history and are aware of our places and our ceremonies? And what does that look like for them? Because they're the future. Those are the ones we need to be asking. What does that look like to you? What does that feel like? How do we know that we've met that goal for our future generations?
I agree with you 110%. With our youth, I have taken 2 of my grandsons to Washington, D.C. to lobby for our health. And when they sat there that first day, they listened to everything. They were right on the forefront. they like those senators, Congress, and all of those guys, they give them the what for. And they just kind of leaned back and they were like, wow. I mean, they had their numbers down, they did their homework too. And I'll tell you, it was pretty amazing how they responded to the youth and they did actually thank us for bringing, because they actually listened at a totally different level. And because I try to tell my grandson, well, you know, that's what you want. And he's like, no, Grandma, I want to be an underwater welder. Okay, well, I'll support you in that. Okay, that's a good, you could probably make some money on that. Oh, I know I can. So about 2-3 months ago, he came and he says, Graham, I said, I'm thinking about politics. And I was like, really? You know, I was ready to roll. And he said, yeah, but you know, I don't want to go back to Washington, D.C. and wear no damn suit. You know, that ain't in my, I can't do that. Well, one of the gals that was with us told him, you can dress any way you want. Just because these guys wear suits doesn't mean anything. You don't have to wear the suit. That's on them. You do what's good for you, and as long as you're voicing your opinion and doing the right thing, it doesn't matter what you wear. So I agree 110% when it comes to the youth. I mean, I'm trying to grow ours early, but you know, you can only do so much and just be there to support. But at least they got the bug.
Yes.
That's the boys and daughter or something else.
We won't ask about that. For anyone who does have youth who either are in college and might want to do an internship with us, we're always open to that. I mean, but we actually mostly just mentor them. Because we want to normalize Native people in these spaces, and it's important to us that we aren't just, you know, the last Native people in state government. But then also, to the extent that there are youth that are interested in state government, or just even what the governor is doing right now, what we're doing right now, we're happy to be a resource. So just want to open that door. Sorry, I'm like very well planted here.
Just happy.
A couple things. I just wanted to acknowledge that today is the day that the Cottonwood Creek Treaty was written in our area, not ratified. And so just want to acknowledge that dispossessed and displaced our people.
Today, exactly?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. Cottonwood Creek.
It's today, right?
18th. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Another thing, I mean, you had asked about documents, and I guess, you know, something I would hope, and that, being the county is on the council, I'm sure she's brought this up, but you know, the act of Congress for the acquisition of Indian lands for the Central Valley Project, you know, and you know, some accountability, because they promised our people like land elsewhere. All they gave us is a little teeny cemetery that is actually kind of not, you know, not very much room there anymore. So some accountability and federal accountability to that, right? Yeah, that was one of the things so that I thought about.
You're on again. I heard it mentioned earlier that California recognizes the Native tribes. Is it an acknowledgement, or have they formally recognized each tribe?
So there isn't a recognition process. There is, the only thing that's currently in law is the SB 18 list. SB 18 is the law that basically created a right of consultation for sacred site protection in local planning, and then that was then incorporated into AB 52 and Pratt and later laws. So it's not a recognition list, it's a list for purposes of cultural resource protection.
And I had a letter from one of the, my private elders that they wanted to submit that the state recognize formally all unrecognized tribes in the state, and I'd like to present it to you guys to take under your consideration.
Yeah, it's recognized by the state, not by the government yet.
And you know, just a very odd interaction to access healthcare for my children in the Rancheria. We'll see our family as California natives. To prove I was a California native, I had to go to the BIA. It had the federal government tell me, and I walked in, and it was so disparaging. And that book that you got, the guy gave me the same book, federal law, and I said, I need help with this. This is the paper I need. My people are on this trust from the Hoopaw Valley. Here's my birth certificates, everybody. You don't come in here and you don't tell me what you need, what I'm gonna give you. I'm very polite, I'll tell you, I was very polite to the guy. And this old man waving his finger at me, telling me how I'm not like the right kind of native for him to support. But to access, again, so let's go back to a formal state recognition process to say this is who we are, because nobody does it. You have a list, you have the BIA, and the hurtful part is like walking out of there, I feel so alone, not part of my people. And I go, you know what? The weird part is someone on the list. These are the people that are supposed to help us and represent us. You know, I don't think big mistrust from the BIA, perhaps, but that was my first-hand lesson. Please help me. And what was wrong? And the guy, smarter than everybody in the room, is just going to tell me for 10 minutes how wrong I was. And very, very hurtful, and nobody to turn to.
Look at me, I'm all like happy. Now they don't even give, CDIBs, to the unrecognized. So I have a CDIB that says I'm into, but my little sister has one that says she's a descendant, and doesn't even say that she's Wintu. It says that she's a descendant of a Wintu person, not that she's a Wintu. Just erasure, continued erasure.
So this is gonna be, I think, the critical problem for California. And I don't know how to solve it, to be frank, but I think that the thing you brought up about CDIB is like directly related to the self-governance movement and recognizing strong sovereign relations, but then at the expense of Native people that the government also owes a trust responsibility to. So it's, I think this has to be a part of whatever recent history is being cataloged in this report, that there's ongoing erasure of California Native people. I feel like I don't know how we're gonna get, and this is why it's such a daunting task, all of this. I don't know how we're gonna get past federal structures if California Native people continue to do this to each other. Like disenrollment, suppressing recognition, all of it, and it's all money. So I just don't know. I would love to hear more thoughts about how we kind of fix this, because we're in this weird space geopolitically as tribes where strong government authority, I think, generally is a good thing, and if it's done with principles of community care and resuming kind of our relationship with the lands and creating structures for California Native people to thrive, that's one thing. But if it's exclusion and competition and all this other crazy stuff, and fighting over limited resources, we're terminating ourselves and we're creating conditions that are never gonna be solved in this lifetime if we keep doing it. So I'm just putting, like, that's the elephant in the room here, is like, there are power structures, there's financial structures, there's all of this stuff that also, like, if we can't get right by each other, like, it's gonna be really challenging to ask state, federal, local, everybody to help.
If California had something in place with state recognition of our historic tribes, I mean, we're not talking about a bunch of rogue tribal groups, you know, jumping up and saying we're this, you know. Cherokee tribe of, and I'm sorry to say that like that, but like Cherokee tribe of Northern California. Well, we don't have Cherokee tribe in Northern California. We have, you know, our tribes that we know historically, you know, and our tribes can testify to, you know, what tribes, you know, are here. You know, so if we can have something in place that actually has state recognition, and then the state champion and push forward the recognition of all of those tribes to the federal government, wouldn't that be great? You know, then all of our people, I mean, how many of our people aren't federally recognized, but they have CDIBs or those papers like my sister has, you know? And even our different ones that don't have CDIBs, but our tribal community, we know who they are, you know, we know who our people are, who our relatives are, blonde hair, blue eye, doesn't matter. You know, so, I don't know, I think that would be something that, you know, as a recommendation that the state could champion that for our people, you know, develop a federal recognition, or a state recognition.
Could it be something that's in a bill that says, California, you've already recognized us, you have us on record, why can't you give us a card, just like a tribal member gets a card saying, yes, you're a tribal member. Why can't the state give the state California Indians that are not federally recognized a card that says, hey, that you're California recognized, this is your California roll number, and this makes you eligible for any clinic or different things within the state of California, because you feel really cheated as a native when you have to jump through hoops to prove who you are. It's like, I'm not a dog, I'm not a horse, how come I have to have all this pedigree stuff to prove who I am? You know, and I think when they pass that and on our land, I think that we deserve at least the recognition of who we are, and I think that they could probably do that. And I don't know whether it's in a bill, a policy, however they choose to do it. And I think that if they would step up to the plate and accept some of the responsibility for our Native people in the state of California, that I think they're doing their fiduciary responsibility to us.
And make it policy that is in place, that can't just be, sorry,
One of the issues with the federal government I see is you're talking about in your lifetime. When did they initiate the original walls? 1928, and we're still here trying to settle it. And the federal government goes back and says, well, the records do not state that. The records do not state that there's a number of America. Whatever. On the 28 applications that I've gone through on our family members, it lists Hoopaw as your tribe. That was the reservation. Doesn't mean that was your tribe.
That's where they put it.
So you can't refute the government because they said this is our record. So you're a Hoopaw, not a Snider-Ashtari, not a Miranda. What, you know, correcting the records is what we're having an issue with. We know who, like everybody else, we know who we are. We know where we come from. We know our people. It's convincing them to believe in us. Everybody that's gone through the federal recognition process is a joke. They want you to go back to where they don't even have records. And they're all basing this on the treaties that they've never honored, or even committed. When they entered those treaties, they knew they weren't gonna honor them.
I found them.
Yeah, they're available. But because they were not ratified by Congress, they don't mean anything.
Yeah. I found the treaties.
Yeah.
They were never ratified.
Right.
They're in the archives in Washington DC in the BIA office. They're hidden down in the basement. They're all there.
They want you to prove who you are, but they know who you are because they refute it. Because we have the records and we don't believe you are who you are.
So sitting here listening and sometimes I get in trouble because I look at the other side of, we're sitting here talking about policy and the government but us as people, people, that's what we have to remember. Us as people have to come together and say, we recognize you. When we go to ceremony, everybody is recognized. We don't sit there and say, oh, you're from over there, or you're from down south, or that doesn't happen. Because us as people, we know who we are. We know where we come from. And I feel very strong until we as people can come together and recognize each other and quit fighting over land and non-federally recognize and recognize, because you know who we're hurting? We're hurting our children. And the more I think about it that's what has to happen. We have to set that. We as the people, and then the state. We can't expect the state to come up for that solution for us. Sitting here at this table and, at the beginning I said there's a reason why Creator put us here. Put these thoughts in our mind and our hearts. And we have a voice. Like I said, I get in trouble for my voice sometimes because I'm going to say what nobody wants to say in this room. And us as people, tribal people, indigenous, aboriginal, we've got to set that tone. Start reflecting back. And that's how we're going to get that solution.
It's not a solution of us recognizing, it's getting the government to go along with our position. All the tribes in Trinity County recognize each other. They know who they are. They know where they belong. They know their ceremonies and stuff. You share those, but it's the government we're convincing who we are, and we know who we are.
Yeah, but who's in the back channels telling them not to recognize, right? I mean, that's happening.
I mildly agree that I see the politics and the power play and the power grab. If you look at the federal recognition process as it stands now, I think the backlogs and the backstops and all that kind of stuff, maybe it is bigger than Northern California or California was as a whole. But if you propose that the back jam in the process has something to do with people behind the scenes pulling the power control federally, I mean, I'm a pretty naive guy.
No, it is. I'm not a conspiracy. That's happening.
Stop it, right? And that's kind of why I got a little emotional before, because we talk about it's 1928. It's just another 50 years, just another 100 years, another 200 years, and I was just feel like there's this ticking. Just get it going. We just wait them out because the United States will be here, and if we just wait a little bit longer, keep the process convoluted and not efficient. And I guess the last thing I'm going to say is, in the vein of everything that everybody's saying, this is my first time in a room like this with everybody gathered, focused, and I love the synergy, and I love the area, and I love the space that we're in, and I would just hope that we don't have to wait a year or 6 months to sit down and say, hey, I recognize you, or I honor you, or we're all in this together, whatever struggle it may be, statewide, countywide, nationally. And again, for the children, there's so much, so many things to air here, but so much positivity and light, maybe, just by being together. Thank you guys for coming and for having me and allowing me to speak.
I had a comment about doing this work all these years, I see where resources are critical to these governments. And in California, if you look all up and down the coast, there's only like one tribe recognized all along the coastline. Here in Shasta County, Shasta Dam, it's not recognized. And if you look in certain other places where there's a lot of either financial resources like San Francisco or Los Angeles, they're not recognized. And I think there's a lot to be said about they're trying to control those areas. They don't want input from those tribal nations. And so I do wonder if they'll ever get recognized as a result of those resources in those areas. So I think that's something to think about when you talk about the dream of dreams. My dream of dreams would have been, I mean, obviously I would like to have everything back, but if you're talking about from the perspective of California and what they can do and be that arm that could possibly change things, maybe that could be recognizing all of our people. And like they said, we know who our people are. There's documentations of years and years and years of documenting our people. And the gaming has really divided our people. It's very sad. It was initially set up to help us be self-serve. We could support ourselves, self-supportive. But it actually has not, the trajectory of it has not turned out that way. It has helped our people, yes, but it also has divided our people. You have some tribes, gaming tribes, that are in lucrative areas where there's a lot of money, and then you have some tribes where there's 5 tribes trying to run a casino 1 mile from each other. I mean, there's no comparison. And so, if I had my dream of dreams, there would be, if we had to have gaming, there would be gaming in areas, but that money would be shared with all the tribes, and there would be, housing and things, medical, all built into that. And I think, California has done a lot to pivot change in the nation. I actually was on the committee in Los Angeles that changed Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. There's things that, California's a powerful state. They do a lot of change nationally. And so I think I'm appreciative to have this time to be here with so many of these people who advocate, and I know they advocate. They're out there doing this work, and I'm honored to be here with them today, and then also you guys as well. I just wanted to say that thank you for continuing to come out and do this work and dealing with this trauma. I mean, we're here for a moment. I mean, we deal with it every day, but you guys are really getting it, so thank you.
Maybe a little bruised today.
It's like every day. This is actually less traumatic than working in the governor's office. I'm not even kidding.
We'll buy you a turkey dinner at the festival tomorrow.
Would anyone else like to say anything? Well, I really, really appreciate this conversation. I think that we've gotten into some really challenging issues. I think we're not going to move forward if we don't deal with them, if we don't talk about them, or if we pretend that they don't exist. And I really think that it's going to take all of us coming together, not just the elected officials, but also the community leaders, and the healers and the elders to tell us how to do this right, and what it should look like. And the youth, what do you want? What do you want from this future? Do you want to keep asking the government for scraps? Do you want to keep asking the government to gather when your ancestors gathered since time immemorial?
When you can fish and when you can't.
When you can fish, when you can't, that being dependent on whether you're part of the right tribe or not. we have some major issues to work through, and I really appreciate the energy here and the willingness to talk about all this stuff, because, again, I think we can't solve it without everybody thinking about it. So, this is an open conversation, open invitation if you'd like us to come back. I know we wanna be in Reading at some point too. We're kind of committed to this, to traveling around the state, doing this work. We'll be thinking about how to enable the community to more actively engage in this. But again, as I mentioned, I don't think this is gonna be done when the report's out, but we do want something for people to think about and to start moving on, and then continue to work, continue to have iterations of, but definitely don't want to just have something that sits on a shelf. So we're very hopeful that, you know, if you have ideas in the near term, there are a few things I heard today that we can start doing. And if you have ideas that should be put to the council, because some of the things you said are just state policy and we can just do that, that's what we do. Some of the things are kind of bigger lifts that I think the council needs to discuss, and whether those are things they should put as recommendations. But open invitation to engage with us. If you'd like to ever talk on Zoom, we can do that. Conference call's fine too. And we're happy to come meet you where you're at as well. And our offices are always open, but as I said, the governor's office feels a bit like a tomb sometimes, so we don't totally recommend that.
So I put blankets on the walls and try to Indian it up a bit. But I just also want to encourage you all to share with your communities. We're a small but mighty team, and so we'll post on social media, but recognize that doesn't reach everybody. And so if you can help us by spreading the word, we would really appreciate that, because we want to get as many people involved in this process as possible. And if you're going to Salmon Fest tomorrow, stop by and say hi. We'll have some more swag. I have some little coloring books and some pens that are deep in my car, so I didn't grab those for this meeting. But we'd love to see you tomorrow.
So you want a turkey dinner too, huh?
We like Jane in your car, right?
Basically. I have the canopy, I have a cowbell wagon. And I did want to open it up to see if anyone would like to close us in a good way. And if not, that's completely fine.
You know, you were saying these committees, you have a land committee and a water committee?
No,
No?
so those will probably be what we do a summit on.
Okay.
So, we know that DWR does a water summit, that just happened this year, but we do it specific to this process. A land summit would be another one where we talk about kind of the state of the state and who has land, who doesn't, who has access, who
The
doesn't.
reason why I asked is that I like to get on that water, but my understanding, Board of Equalization is getting sued for water.
Lots of people are getting sued right now.
Yes, about 4 tribes are gonna sue, are suing them, because they're not getting water, they're not.
Yeah.
State's taking it away.
Okay, thank you all.
Is one of the tribes that are here going to close it?
Would anyone like to have final words or thoughts?
That could be a prayer meeting. One of the things.
Can offer a song.
We can pause it for you.
You all done? Okay.